All right. This is How to Be a Great Boss Book Club version 2, or we should say episode 2. You guys may have recalled from the first episode, if I can make this move. Oh, there we go. 1 of 2 sessions. So part 1, we addressed what it meant to be a great boss. Do you have what it takes? We also talked about delegate and elevate, which we are having fun with our company doing right now, and surrounding yourself with great people, and then leadership, management, and accountability. I think it's L plus M equals A, right? So that's kind of the idea. So I'm going to move through these slides, and I apologize, I have to minimize your heads here. Okay, so these are from our first session, essentially going through, do you have what it takes? And it really focuses on the get it, want it, have the capacity to do the job as a big part of it. And then again, delegate, elevate. We talked about things we like doing and things we're good at doing, and also things that we are good at doing, but maybe don't like doing. And that comes into play as we build out our org chart. Surrounding ourselves with great people. We talked about the people analyzer in Traction, which is dynamite. Try to use it as frequently as you can, and establish a bar that is acceptable inside your company. Leadership plus management equals accountability. We had 4 truths that we addressed. And essentially, we just reminded ourselves that leadership was working on the business and management was working in the business. So leadership, you're creating direction. With management, you're having clear expectations. And lastly, we talked about the idea of vision and traction, right? VTO, the vision traction organizer, and traction. And if you have both the vision and the traction in place, you should experience growth. So that was the gist of it. So now here we are. We're on book 2, or I should say part 2 of the book. And there were 5 more chapters. The first one dealt with leadership practices. The next one was management practices. It then goes into detail about a quarterly conversation and what that means. And we address the 4 people issues every company runs into. And then there's a final word on the book. So first off, this was a great quote in this chapter 6, I think it was. With regard to leading, if you pull a string and it will follow you wherever you go, but if you push a string, it will go nowhere at all. It's just that way when you're leading people. Dwight D. Eisenhower stated that back in the 50s. And I think it's pretty clear what that means. The idea is that you need to lead by example and bring them along to achieve a higher level of performance. So let's talk about the leadership practices outlined in the book. The first was giving clear direction. And really there, you're looking at creating a compelling vision for your team. So what does that mean? So this was important because, we think about how to be a great boss in a lot of different levels. It has to do with really interacting with the person below you or working with you, one of your associates. And we really don't get into the vision side much, but this book clearly identifies that vision is at the forefront of good communication and interaction with your staff. So in the case of vision, we're looking at 8 key things. Traction does a great job of taking you through this process. This book actually outlines it pretty well as well. It's done over 2 pages, so it's not a lot of stuff to read. But number 1 is your core values and understanding what's important to you as a company and you as a person. Number 2 is the mission statement or the core focus, where you're going. Number 3 is having like a vision or 10-year target. That is very much like in your mind's eye. So what does the place look like? What does your life look like? What, for your people in your organization, what does it mean for them with their positions and rolling up through the organization? All those pieces give you a picture. And so then you have to communicate that picture And to communicate that picture, that's your marketing strategy, really. So that's where you would say, yes, we have a strategy. Yes, we have a marketing plan. This is what that looks like. Here's how we'll communicate externally from the company. You also communicate internally too. So I say there's internal element to marketing strategy as well. So that's kind of your vision piece. Then there's a traction element. It's actually the 3-year picture is kind of in between the two. So a 3-year picture will probably focus on, you're talking 36 months from now. You can look backwards 36 months and say, okay, how did my life change the last 36 months? Where was I? What was my role? What was what the company looked like 36 months ago? So you do the same process going forward, and that really helps get everybody swimming the same direction, so to speak. Then a 1-year plan is really like within reach, right? So within 1 year, we're going to be here. Well, you should be able to almost align to that every day when you're working. Are we on track? Are we going the right direction? Again, taking it down to a 90-day segment, we start looking at what projects you would put in place to achieve that goal. That's the annual plan. And then lastly, you have any and all issues. So if you are addressing issues and having conversations with about issues with your employees, it's showing that you're take it seriously and that you're committed to change and improvement. And if you don't, and you just have these issues that are ongoing and they're like the elephant in the room, you're in essence, you're endorsing that obstacle or that issue. So you want to make sure that you get issues into the vision discussion. So next up, communicating the quarterly state. So this is something I don't do a good job of, because our company for the most part is our leadership team. So we do a pretty good job of communicating, but for anyone and everyone, I highly recommend that you create a state of the company meeting. It can be a document that you push around to your employees as just a newsletter from the president or whatever it might be. In it, you just want to do these 3 things. Where have you been? Where are you going? Where you've been, where you are, and where you're going to be going. Each quarter, leadership teams can fill in those things with data points, like 3 of the most relevant data points, any metric you might look at, and then you put it into a message that can be really concise and delivered every quarter and be consistent with it. So if you have 20 employees, that's probably as important as anything, right? Is to be able to communicate the state of the company. So number 2, leadership practice is make sure you provide the necessary tools. So what are the necessary tools? So when I look at my company, peer executive groups, you're looking at training, technology, additional people, right? Because you'll have them screaming about additional people or resources, and you can't ignore it all the time. So training, technology, additional people, and most importantly, your time and attention. So it's okay to have a to-do pile as the leader of your company or the leader of your department, but just make sure that you know that that's not a priority for your role. You are really in a position of leadership, and you should be communicating and interacting with them to help them achieve their goals, and certainly find time to get yours done too. So the third item after you provide the necessary tools is you want to make sure that you let go of the vine. Now, the trick with this is to know when that is. So we have a disclaimer here. Do not let go until you have the right people in the right seats. So that's most critical. If you do that at the wrong time, obviously it could be tragic for your company and tragic for you in that role. They tell the story in this chapter about the guy who's hanging from a vine off the side of a cliff, and essentially the person up above is going to pull him up, and they're saying, are you, gosh, I don't want to mess this up. I think it was like it was like God was pulling him up, and it's like, do you trust me? Yes. Okay. Then just let go of the vine. And the person hanging from the vine's like, is there anyone else up there, right, that could give me some other advice? But that's the truth of the matter, is that at some point, there's a certain amount of trust that needs to go in with letting go of the vine. We have a situation in our company where if someone's not doing their job properly or doing a specific task that we ask properly, we have a tendency to pick it up and do it ourselves. That's not going to create forward progress for the company, and it's not a way to be a great boss, right? So that's kind of the idea. So the other part to it is letting go of the vine. How do they get there? So there's a book called Drive, and they talk about it in this chapter. It's the surprising truth of what motivates us. If anybody has Blinkist, you can get this book done in about 7 minutes. But it really focuses on 3 main items, and that is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So when we're talking about having your people have autonomy to make the decisions they need to get the work they need to do. Also, mastery and purpose are the other 2 reasons why people are motivated. And so you keep that in mind as you are trying to motivate your employees. This is a great one. So this also is addressed in the chapter. They talk about the 1-minute manager and the monkey. And it's very important as a manager of resources to know that the monkey doesn't belong to you. So when somebody comes to you with a problem or they need help, your job is not to take on that issue, right? It's their issue to resolve. You're there to coach, ask questions, get them thinking to make a change. But whatever you do, don't take the monkey. The monkey does not belong to you. And also what happens when you don't take the monkey is you do start to create autonomy with your employees. All right, so number 4 leadership practice we learned in the book is to act with the greater good in mind. So this is like, as you make decisions and you interact with your staff, always keeping in mind what's good for you, what's good for your staff person are important, but also align it back to your vision, right? Back to your values, acting with the greater good in mind. And they use an example in the book called the 10-10-10 rule. This is kind of cool. I didn't really get it at first, but I'll try to explain it. So 10-10-10 rule is if you're going to make a decision on something, like let's say, for example, we're looking at creating a phone app for peer groups. So if we're creating a phone app for peer groups, 10 minutes after the decision to make this phone app, how do we feel about it? 10 minutes. So is it still a good idea? Well, we're excited for a minute and then it's kind of faded, or are we still ready to go? The next 10 is 10 months after the decision. So if you started talking about it, it's 10 months later now. You want to think in your head, what will that look like? So where are we going to be in 10 months? Will this be this big thing we've created where a lot of resources and money and time have to go into it? Or will it be a simple solution that gets done and has a big impact, right? So what are the obstacles that need to be overcome? What commitments are necessary to make that decision happen? And then the last test on a decision is to say, 10 years from now, what will this look like? So if 10 years after the decision, it looks like it's a mess and it's not really working out, or does it look like this is a game changer, this creates value, and it has a big impact on our company, then it gives you an idea of whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. An example for me would be our PeerTech decision to create a separate entity, PeerTech, that would have technology in it. And our first technology that we created was our financial scorecard, which was quarterly, which was done in conjunction with an outside vendor. And, looking at that, we say, you know what, from a 10-month decision, it did create a lot of work for us. But from a 10-year decision, I think that we're headed the right direction, that we will continue to have metrics available to our members from sources that we have to invest in. So the last leadership practice that we learn about in the book is to take clarity breaks. How many people, raise your hand, take clarity breaks? Do you know what that means? Got it. I see you. All right. So essentially, clarity breaks are taking time away, right? So we provide clarity breaks from a peer group standpoint. We had a business owner, a very large event rental operator, come into town 3 days early in Baltimore and spent the weekend relaxing, focusing, so that when she started the meeting on Monday or Tuesday, actually, so it was a 3-day, she was zoned in, she was focused. She probably had some time to really reflect on how the business was doing and pulled herself out of the ruckus to kind of have a good, clear head. So clarity breaks are important. It allows you to sharpen the saw. You may also know that term. Anytime you do a different activity to take your mind off of your business, it is providing you with the clarity break. So that's why hobbies are important, and free time. So here are some clarity break questions. And again, I'll make sure anybody in peer groups can have access to this, but this actually would be good also as an exercise inside a peer group meeting. But the clarity break is the vision plan on track? What is your number one goal? Am I focusing on the most important things? Do I have the right people in the right seats to grow? What is the number one people move I need to make this quarter? How strong is my bench? Do I have the resources to fill a seat if needed? Are my processes working well? And what seems overly complicated that can be simplified? So these are all great questions. Actually, I have another page on this. Do I understand what my key reports love to do and are great at doing? Am I leveraging their strengths? What can I delegate to others to use my time more effectively? What can we do to be more proactive and versus reactive? And what can I do to improve communication? Last is, what is my top priority this week or this month? So answering those questions will really center you and bring you back to where you need to be for the good of your employees and having that conversation. So the end of the leadership session, you can take a leadership self-assessment. Again, I like this almost as a spreadsheet that I would come back to every quarter and just gauge where I'm at with leadership. Am I giving clear direction? Am I providing necessary tools? Am I letting go of the vine? Am I acting greater good in mind? Am I taking clarity breaks? So those are those 5 questions. The answer is simply yes or no. There's no in-between answer. Just pick a yes or no on that. So let's move on. So the next section of the book focuses on the 5 management practices. So remember, leadership plus management equals accountability. And in management, the first practice is to keep expectations clear. So we're going to look at roles, core values, rocks, and measurables. So that has to do with an individual. So you're saying, with leadership, we're providing direction. With management, we're really focusing on expectations. So we're really going to say, do you know your roles? Do you know your core values? Do you have your rocks? Are they useful? And what are your measurables? So number 2 is communicating well. So the way you're going to communicate well is there's a concept called 2 emotions. If someone starts talking to you and they're frustrated, they're maybe loud or they're talkative or whatever it might be, you might want to quell them a little bit by saying, I see that you're going through quite a bit right now. Give me 2 emotions you're feeling, one good, one not so good, about this situation. So it can be, well, if this gets resolved, I'd feel really good because this could blah, blah, blah. Or it could be something like, well, here's the thing. I'm in the thick of it. I'm miserable. No one can help me. I'm the only one who can do this job, right? So you get them talking about these 2 emotions that they might be feeling, and it can help from a therapeutic standpoint. The next one is when you're speaking with them, are you directing them or are you asking questions? So you want to look at how many questions are you asking versus making statements. So that balance is important. And usually it's an 80-20 rule, right? You want to do 80% of the time, ask them questions, get them thinking, get them developing themselves. Echoing is this concept of just being able to repeat back to them and echo their sentiment, not necessarily just the words they say, but how they're saying it and recognizing how their feelings are about that. And then last is reminder, thump, thump. So in the book, they talk about how it's really obvious to you what you're saying to a person, and you might take your time and say it slow. You might say it multiple times, but in a lot of cases, all they hear is thump, thump, right? Thump, 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 right? So you're talking to them and they're not catching exactly what point you're trying to make. So just be aware of that. So next, number 3 is to maintain the right meeting pulse. So example number 1 is if you're not meeting with them regularly, then you're 2 circles that are not conjoined in any way, right? They're not touching, you're not meeting with the person, they're going about their tasks, you're going about your tasks, right? And that's it. Second example would be that you are micromanaging, you're on top of each other. So you're riding shotgun and overseeing everything they're doing, and you maybe have an opinion about everything they're doing. And again, that's not ideal either. So the ideal one would be example 3, where you're showing 2 circles joined, but not necessarily overlapping too badly, but at least touching so that there's some interaction. So that's understanding the right meeting pulse. In my case, ideally, I would love to meet with each employee once a week and use a document to facilitate that discussion. It could be prompters with questions that I have written down about how they're doing with their job. I might collect their answers. But again, if you're able to do that for any short period of time over a long period of time, it can make a difference. So number 4, they're suggesting quarterly conversations. So I can tell you from using the tool 90IO and their feedback tool inside of it, it provides you with a template for having a quarterly conversation. It's just like we talked about the last book club, where it is, hey, are you espousing the values of the company? Do you understand your roles and so forth? So we're going to get into this a little more detail. So in a quarterly conversation, they talk about a concept called the 5-5-5. So the idea behind this is you're really going to focus on 3 things when you have this conversation with your employee. The first thing is you're going to look at the core values of your company. So you might want to have a piece of paper with the core values listed, and you're both looking at it and say, you know, is there any conflict with this person's performance and as it relates to the values of the company? Do they really truly believe those values? Are they using them in their day-to-day activity? So that's number 1. If they're not, it becomes an issue that needs to get resolved, goes on the side, right? But you can move on and you can say, okay, number 2, roles in the company. There's 3 to 5, most likely 3 to 5, 3 to 5 values, 3 to 5 roles, hence the 5-5-5. So in the roles, understanding that, it's important you get this done timely and with much quality, but don't forget about this as well. And in some cases, I like to share weighted percentages, like one's more important than the other. They're not all equal, right? You might value one thing more than another in that role. The last one is all the projects that person's working on since last time. Are they taking you towards your vision? Are you achieving your goal? These are called rocks. Usually rocks are written up as a SMART goal. There's an expectation of what that rock's going to do when it gets completed. So you want to take the time to have those conversations. Again, quarterly conversation doesn't take that long. It's these 3 items. Remember the 5-5-5, you should be fine. So lastly, in management practices, you want rewarding and recognizing. So the first 4 are great. The 5th is great. So the 5th one adds value. Number 1 is the 24-hour rule. So from that perspective, if you're going to critique someone or give somebody negative feedback, do it within 24 hours. Don't let it go 2 weeks, 3 weeks to have that conversation. Put it out there, but put it in the context of this is normal. This is how we're going to behave. We're going to take that time immediately to recognize something that needs correction. And the same thing goes for recognition. Somebody does something good, don't hide it, bring it out, make sure you recognize it within 24 hours. It has the biggest impact. When it comes to recognition, you want to be very much aware of public and private. So if you're going to critique somebody, make sure you're doing that in private. If you're going to give somebody kudos, make sure you do that in public. That's essentially the way that you're going to maximize your relationship with your employee. Also, boss versus buddy, be very careful about becoming buddies with the team members working with you. You might want to consider, like, what does that mean, right? So from a boss standpoint, it is, hey, objectively, this is what needs to get done. I'm still your buddy, but these are the things that we have to see these things happen. You get into a lot of conversations, next couple slides, about, well, what are the questions we ask to get that understanding across to them? And then the last point with reward and recognition is the 3-strike rule. You probably all are aware of that. In the case of a quarterly conversation, if there's an issue, it gets brought up, it becomes an issue, we're aware of the issue. Next time we meet, have a conversation. The issue should have been addressed. If not, it becomes a 2nd strike. And then by the 3rd strike, usually the person is not committed to making any change. And so there should be a change inside the organization at that point. So end of the 5 management practices, you would want to also assess yourself. You'd say management self-assessment. And I believe in the 90IO product, when we do feedback, the employee actually gets a chance to evaluate you on these to make sure that there is good communication and expectations are clear and so forth, so on. So those are addressed here. It's a simple yes, no. There is no maybe. How has it been going? You might have good periods, good quarters, and the others might not be as good. So that's okay, but this is a good way to track it. So quarterly conversations, what happens in those? That's really where you talk about what's working and what's not working. This quote was in there, look, I always look, I, Mr. Miyagi. I like look, I, Daniel-san was in the TV or the movie. Anyway, the idea was that, pay attention, look up, be engaged. By doing that reflective speaking back, it shows that you're listening, you're echoing their comments, and you'll see in the next section how to address it with questions. So there's a lot of questions here. So this is what's working. So this could be something they fill in preparation for a meeting. This is something you could just ask and just get some off-the-cuff answers. What are they most proud of? How did they accomplish it? What processes worked well? What obstacles did they overcome? What was most helpful? Do they feel it's important? Do they feel appreciated? Did they have the tools they needed? And were your expectations clear? Were your expectations clear? And then we go over from the what's working part into the what's not working. And there's a book that I listened to. It was called Willful Blindness. And it's about we ignore the obvious at our own peril. So what's not working, you want to create a safe harbor. Hey, listen, we're going to talk about this here. And it's between you and I, and it takes place in this conversation. In this book, Willful Blindness, Margaret Heffernan says something we could know and should know, but don't know because we feel better not knowing, right? So we all know what that kind of statement says. It's essentially don't ask, don't tell. And so that can create a lot of problems for the company, especially if other employees see you, it's the emperor with no clothes, right? So you want to be careful about that. So these are questions you would pop back at your employee or associate. And the important thing is this little monkey picture here, do not take their monkey. So your job isn't to roll up your sleeves and take over. Your job is to kind of help them get through what they're going through. So number one is what process is broken? How well do they understand root cause? Was it in or out of their control? Did they have responsibility, autonomy, and accountability to act? That one's important because in many cases, frustration comes because they don't have those 3 pieces. So let's make sure that, you set them up to succeed, not fail. Did they plan well and fail to execute? That's on them. That's something you need to share with them and have a conversation. Did you fail them in any way? That's an important question. And then last is, did you provide the necessary tools? But do not take the monkey. So lastly, I call this questions to get them thinking. These are useful for dialoguing. What could they have done differently? When did they realize there was a problem? What action did they take? What is the plan so it won't happen again? What resources would they need? And how do they think they can help? Right. So those are some things to think about. Problems are broken into 3 categories. These are issues too, obviously problems, issues. So number 1 is you have problems that can't be solved. So you're just going to stick them in that pile, address them later. Usually it has to do with external threats, things that aren't necessarily inside your company. Then you have issues or problems that you must solve, and it's on you. You're the owner. You're the only one who can make it happen, i.e. you need money. You need to put some money into something. They can't make that decision. And then lastly, there's ones they must solve, which would be addressing these items here. So next to last chapter in the book, 4 people issues. This looks very basic, but it's not. So there are 4 people issues that you're going to encounter. One is going to be right person, right seat. One is right person, wrong seat. One is a wrong person in the right seat. And one is a wrong person in the wrong seat. So how does right person, right seat become an issue? Why would that be an issue? Well, it's an issue because most owners and managers do not have regular conversations with those people. They're doing their job. They're doing it well. There's no reason to slow down the bus to talk to them and get their feedback because you're focused on the problem child, right? And by the way, bad idea. So the idea is if you have the right person in the right seat, give them the energy, give them the time. They're going to be able to multiply and become even more valuable to the company. So make sure that you address them as equals or even more important than wrong person, right seat. So let's go to right person, wrong seat. So if you have the right person, meaning A, they get our values, B, they get the job, they get the essence of the job, and they have the capacity to do the job, but they're in the wrong seat, most likely because they don't want the job. They don't necessarily like that type of work. We've seen it. We've seen it where you can stall a person for so long and then they're just like leave the company because they're in the wrong seat. Or they could maybe not have the capabilities to do the job. So they want to do the job, but they don't have the capabilities to do it. So we talked about that a little bit last time about how to develop them, training and development and resources. The next one is wrong person, right seat. So now you've got a person who can do the job, does it well, but is probably a bad apple. We actually, they used a great phrase in another book. It was, I'm not going to remember it, but it focused on, they're like jerks, right? So there's an adjective in front of jerks, but essentially they're the ones who can do their job inside and out, but they make it very rough on everybody in the organization for many reasons, essentially may not espouse the values of the company, that kind of thing. And then you have the wrong person in the wrong seat, and that's simply just stupidity for having that person there for as long as they've been there. You just need to make that change ASAP, right? So keep that in mind. So final word, this makes you hungry for dessert. Good turnover versus bad turnover, right? So this whole thing about managing people and leading people, you're going to have turnover. If you are doing all the right things with the 5 practices of leadership and the 5 practices of management, then you will have good turnover because people will not leave unless they are not in the right spot, right? If you're not doing good leadership and not building accountability with good management, you'll have bad turnover. You'll lose a good resource for the wrong reasons. So that's really what it comes down to. If you measure metrics, you might want to look at this if you have a lot of employees and say, what is our good turnover and what is our bad turnover? And you'll know what we mean when somebody leaves, right? This is a bad turnover. We really want to keep them, or this is good turnover. They didn't really fit with us. So that, just keep that in mind. And that is it for today. That covers the book, How to Be a Great Boss. René Boer is a great author in this book, and he is a EOS implementer at Rental Max. So he's very familiar with the rental industry. Certainly, if you come across any Rental Max employees, they can kind of give you some feedback on what René has been able to do in their organization. If you're looking for EOS help in implementing, there are a ton of different ways you can do that with us, whether it's through our Prestige program or just through some of the, piecemeal a la carte services that we do related to EOS. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this book club, and we'll be back next quarter with a book about execution. So take care.
Thanks, Dean.
Hey, no problem, Charlie.